change that clock. I only think about it every time I go to meeting.
Is it off?
2 minutes.
It's 3:58.
I need to let our IT guy know we'll be on YouTube Live. So I'll need to let him know before we start.
You might go ahead and turn it up.
He's sitting there with his finger over the keyboard.
He's just waiting.
Pretty quick.
The red button. I recommend that you not open your devices.
I'm sorry, I'm still waiting on the Redskins thing to see what the name is.
They can see what you're looking at from the camera back there.
I was busted for that last week, as a matter of fact. Someone said, "Oh, we can see you open your tablet."
I didn't think they were going to name anything yet. They did. They've already released it, saying they were going to change the name.
Oh, my.
Redskins.
Redskins.
Someone, I like the name, someone suggested the Red Tails, like the Tuskegee Airmen. I thought that was kind of cool. But we know that's part of that.
I bet Red's in the name someplace.
Well, you have to think
He
so.
it started automatically, he wasn't ready for that.
Oh, he wasn't.
Did you hit the button?
Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you're here. Appreciate you being here. We'll go ahead and I'll call this meeting to order. Everybody get an opportunity to look at the minutes from the previous meeting.
Yep.
I think that was a Zoom meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard to keep up, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Had so many Zoom meetings. It's real. Any comments? Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
Got a
second.
motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There is none. Motion carries. Let's sign that one a second. The only thing we have on the agenda today is consider and take appropriate action on the City of Canyon Comprehensive Plan implementation matrix and annual report. Everybody bring your book that has one.
Does anybody need a comprehensive plan book? Does everybody have one? Wow, that's impressive. You don't have one?
Not with me.
Okay, let me give you one. I got a plan here. Anybody else need one? How about zoning books? Brian, you don't have one.
I've got a plan.
I've got a plan.
Might need a magnifying glass.
Thank you.
Zoning code. Anybody else need a zoning code? It's fixing to be outdated, but let's
Get rid of them before they.
yeah, it's a fire sale. Let's get rid of them now.
All right.
John, would you like to kind of introduce it, talk about what you went through? You guys, John kind of headed this thing up, as you guys remember. He was our main staff liaison and worked with a comprehensive planning committee, which I think Bill was on, Maggie was on, and went through probably a good almost a year of working with that committee and doing a lot of community engagement through community meetings, and he was like a carny out on the square one day, yelling at people, come on over and throw darts. Got a lot of community engagement through that process. But it did direct us at one point in time to come back annually and give a report. In Chapter 9, it gives us a matrix, which really gives us a good way to follow through what we should be doing to keep up with this plan. And, John and I have made some notes. We kind of modified what you see in your book and put together a matrix showing action and what we've done, where we're at as a city and as a staff. As you can see, most of it's in process, but with our new subdivision ordinance and zoning ordinance you guys have heard us talking about. Lord, we got you in the desk way down to record.
Here's how you can get them recorded.
So we made some notes on what actions have been. We want to go through that with you guys today and get your support to move forward and present this to the city commission, give them an update report on where we're standing with this. At some point in time, we'll come back and look at any updates, modifications we want to make to the plan. There'll be a more formalized process, but it's just kind of an informal process, just to update you guys on where we're at. John, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'll just jump in there, and Danny talked about the input that we got from citizens and all those things we worked toward, and, you know, that, the purpose of the plan, and it's in your book on page 7, you know, what is a comprehensive plan's purpose? And it talks a little bit there, and I'm just gonna read this one paragraph or one piece. In order to achieve these desired outcomes, the comprehensive plan considers the city's existing conditions and forecasts future trends to understand and articulate how both tangible factors and intangible factors will impact the city's future decisions. So in other words, we tried to look into the crystal ball and say, what was Canyon? What do we want Canyon to be? What has it been? And how do we keep moving? And so this whole study, the plan was, okay, if the citizens of Canyon want to move in this direction or these particular directions, how do we do that? And so at the back of the plan, as Danny mentioned, was the implementation chapter, chapter 9. And in that chapter, it goes through and lists recommendations. And so, as Danny said, what we've done is we've looked at every one of those recommendations, and in just a moment, we'll start going through each one of those, because it's the city staff's responsibility to start us moving in that direction. The commission, the city commission adopted this, you all adopted this, everybody said, yes, that's a direction we want to go. It's a roadmap, but it's not a roadmap that it's not like Google Maps. It doesn't give us all our rights and our lefts. It kind of tells us where we want to go, and it says we want to get here, but we're right here right now. And so it's city staff's responsibility to try to get there and move along. And it's your all's responsibility as you vote on things and change things and create new policies to try to get there also. And we may weave around and we may make some right hand and left hand turns. We don't exactly know how we're going to get there, but the goal is to get to that point. And where we get lost as a city is if we never have that point. You'll see many cities and they're at this point and they're just going right and left, but they never know if they got there. And they never really know where they're trying to go. And so this plan hopefully put those points out there for us, and now we can shoot for them. So I think that kind of gives you just a general idea of what the comprehensive plan does. And that means that we make progress, and as Danny said, in 4 or 5 years, we're supposed to go back and update this thing. Go back and look at it and say, okay, you're going to see in a minute, wow, we're really moving on these things. Well, in a few years, some of them are going to be ticked off. Now, there are always things you have to keep looking at, but we're going to check some boxes. And then it's going to be time to look at it again. Okay, you're moving in the right direction. Where do the citizens 5 or 6 years from now, where do they want to go? All of a sudden they say, well, we're not sure that's where we want to go. Well, we'll start moving in a different direction. And that's all I have, Danny. That kind of puts a direction for us to go.
We just start with chapter 3 as our future land use, and there's some recommendations under chapter 3. As you can see in item number 1, it talks about updating the subdivision zoning ordinance. Natural recommendations of this plan. So hopefully we've gone through as we've worked on these zoning ordinances as with freezing Nichols. Luckily, freezing Nichols is working with us through the process of adopting these zoning ordinances and these subdivision ordinances. They're consulted with that as well as with the comprehensive plan, so they have a good background and good knowledge of what's going on. And I don't know, does everybody know Joe Price, our city manager?
Hello.
And Dan Reese, our public works director. These two guys have a huge part in this, of course. A lot of the utilities and streets and whatnot you'll see throughout this process. Dan's gonna be the lead on that, so we asked him to be here just in case he had any extra comments on that. A lot of things we're still, like you see, with the planning process or ongoing or haven't started, but we're well underway with what we're working on with Freeze and Nichols. Regarding this update, zoning and subdivision regulations, it says review all the recommended code updates with the Planning and Zoning Commission, City Commission. So that part is in process. You guys really haven't seen the draft zoning ordinance, which is virtually done. That was done a while back. We decided to step back and present that zoning ordinance with the subdivision ordinance at the same time. We did a major rewrite of that zoning ordinance, and we'll talk more about that. Some of the things, you know, when they go before the stakeholders, may not hold up. We understand that. You guys have seen that. There's sign ordinances and whatnot. Some of y'all that were on here when we were discussing sign ordinance, that was a lengthy process. As we started bringing in some of the business owners and sign companies and stakeholders, we received some great input and thought, well, maybe that's not the way to do that, or maybe you can change some other things, add some more restrictions. But anyway, I think we've got a really good document that Freeze and Nichols has worked with us through that we'll present to you guys with the subdivision ordinance. The subdivision ordinance is for the most part done. We've kind of gone back with some development standards chapter that we probably had 5 pages maybe, and we've gone to 30 pages, and we needed that. So what you'll see in the subdivision ordinance process, you're going to see a totally revamped subdivision ordinance, which you guys haven't seen a lot of. You're very familiar with the zoning ordinance, most of you have been on here for a while. The subdivision ordinance deals with just that, platting subdivisions and all the processes which go along with that, street widths, and then it will refer to, as it names out things like street widths and describes the platting process and many things. That you'll have that subdivision ordinance, and that will reference to when you get into details like, okay, here's a street width based on subdivision ordinance, and here's the details of construction of those streets, how much hot mix, you know, what's the base material underneath that. Things like that are going to be referenced in an engineering criteria manual, which will be more detailed, and then we'll have what we're putting together as a development guide, which we don't have, which we're in dire need of. This is really going to be, I'm excited about this. Hopefully that's going to be a guide we can hand out when you begin in that process, whether you're a land developer, whether you're an engineer, whatever, just a homeowner coming in wanting to move out and do something. We can hand you this quick guide to the development process and says, I want to plat, this is the guy I need to see to begin with, and here are a few of the steps you're going to be looking at, what you expect in that process, all the way through the zoning, annexation, subdivision, zoning, building permits. So it's going to be a quick guide to reference you, okay, this is where I need to go to get that correct information. So most of that's going to start with our department, as it always does, and we'll see that the other departments are involved. The true experts are going to get involved and give us the entry. But anyway, that's what we're working on. If you see item number 1 with the update to zoning subdivision regulations and whatnot, that's in process. And by process, I mean that we've spent the last, I've lost track, 8-9 months working on subdivision ordinance, and prior to that we were working on zoning ordinance. So those are in process, and you guys will be the first to see that. We'll bring in some stakeholders, first city board to see that. We'll bring in some stakeholders and visit with them like we did before, and try to make that as transparent process and get it right. You know where to go with this. So that's what we're at on item number 1 under future land use, is working those two ordinances. You guys have anything else, anything to add to that?
Just amen.
You know what that means?
What amen?
I mean, that's not long.
Number 2, Danny.
Number 2, promote the development of key gateways and nodes for no residential development. my definition of, and look at study the definition of nodal development. You've got, a good example to me of a nodal development would be, well, Madison Park is a good example of Madison Park, because there's, as it develops, anyway, it may not be there yet, but as it develops, and even Canyon East as it develops out. The idea is you have residential developments, you have some commercial developments, you can do a lot of conducting life within that node, within that area. It recommends that we have nodal developments at the intersection of 33, 31, and Highway 17. I wish I'd put a map up there, but that's Hunsley Road in I-27. So that's not actually within the city, but down the line, that's a guide for us. That's why that's an ongoing process. As we move along, we're going to try to, as you guys look at these developments we bring to you for zoning and subdivision, we all need to be mindful of that. We want to focus on nodal development, because the reason being is those things are kind of lollipop developments, as they call them. They're out there by themselves and not close to the city center, so it's ideal for them to have some of those city amenities out there that they may need for retail, restaurants, etc., office space. It also recommends it at 4th and I-27 in any areas north of West Country Club Road. That's why I mentioned Madison Park. That's a fairly good example of an nodal development, because there's a mix of commercial and residential out there in those areas. So that's kind of an ongoing process, something to keep in mind as we move forward as staff and as the city commission and P&Z move forward with that. So, update zoning regulations to require higher standards for non-residential uses and retail and commercial uses. That zoning ordinance is going to address that in some fashion. At the time, as we go through this, at the time we were developing this, we had a little bit more authority to, as you guys know, like most of you know, to require higher standards. Well, the state legislature, in one example, said you can't tell them to put up masonry exterior because aluminum siding is allowed by the code. So there's some restrictions that hold us back on that. However, as most of you know, that we are able to do some overlay districts as long as it's a Main Street district, which Canyon luckily has a large Main Street district that goes covers the central business district downtown area, all of 4th Avenue and virtually all of 23rd Street. So we can still cover our major retail and business areas with requiring some higher standards. So and that does that. That ordinance in preparation has what we call a Main Street overlay district, where we can have some of those higher standards. So we're moving towards that. John, I believe the next couple of years.
Yeah, number 3, create family-oriented venues and gathering places. You know, one of the things we heard from everybody was we wanted more things for families, we want more things for kids to do. Well, that's not really something that specifically you know, we work with parks and doing those kind of things, but as far as bringing in other businesses like that, it's not necessarily something the city itself does, but it is something that the EDC does. That's something that they can look at, and we need to be working on that, and we've shared that with economic development and to continue to encourage those type of business to come here. We all know when the numbers are right and someone can make $1 at it, what will happen? That will happen. They'll be here. But there's also ways for us to look for others to incentivize them and do that. Moving down, in part of that was we actually had some early conversations before CISD got started on the work at the Happy Stadium. There was some talk of maybe working with them on that banquet area and those kind of things. So we were talking about some other ways of reaching out and trying to do some things. So there may be some opportunities in the future to do some joint ventures and try to make those kind of things work out. Number 4, continue to work with EDC to promote new business. You know, that's always an ongoing thing. That's a real important thing, as a matter of fact, to Joe, to make sure that EDC understands that's a separate board and a separate group, but they need to understand that there's tools that we have in our toolbox that if we put those tools together with what EDC can offer, then we may be able to make some pretty good packages for people and hopefully encourage the right type of businesses and those businesses that we're looking for here to move into Canyon. So we're ongoing with those. They're just things that are going to always keep going. The important thing will to always think about our mind. I don't accomplish that. You just have to be aware of it for the future. All right, Danny.
Assist in speeding up the development review process and waiving development fees for new businesses that align with the goals of the plan. Again, we're in process with subdivision ordinance and a development guide. We have implemented several strategies, initiatives throughout to kind of help that flow easier and work better for the developers, architects, etc. One example, we've begun some regular departmental meetings. We have a regular 9 o'clock Thursday meeting in our planning development office, where if you have an upcoming project or the project's underway, just let us know that you'd like to be at that meeting, and we'll make sure that representatives from Public Works, Water Department, even City of Emerald Health Department, which a lot of them have some dealings with, the restaurants and whatnot. All the players that you need to be visiting with, whether you need to know what it's going to take to get water service, or what my health department requirements going to be. Fire department's there represented if you have fire marshal questions, sprinkler systems, etc. So we provided that process to help those guys discuss. It's been very successful, very positive experience. All those guys have it on their weekly schedule, and they're ready to show up unless we don't have anybody, and we'll cancel meetings. But that's an example of what we've done thus far. We've also prepared a flow chart to remind staff as well as those developers, but primarily remind staff, hey, this is the flow of that process, and reminds you, let's set a deadline of how long it's going to take us to respond to those questions. If somebody submits a set of plans, you have 2 weeks for review and get back to those guys. So it kind of reminds us to keep that project moving too. So that's still some things underway, and we'll continue to move forward with those future subdivision ordinances and particularly zoning ordinances. But we have made a few changes based on these suggestions. So that's one example. Number 5, focus key non-residential redevelopment areas through prime thoroughfares and intersections, including intersection 4th Avenue and 23rd Street. Create a redevelopment plan policy for key thoroughfares. That really hasn't started. I don't think there's anything we've done in regards to that. That's something we still need to work on. Work with EDC to bring target business to those areas. That's always ongoing as people come to Edwin. I know with Joe, but I have more than weekly conversations with Edwin, her department, to discuss these incoming projects. Always great conversations, but she does a wonderful job of recruiting businesses, and that'll continue to happen. That intersection, as you guys know, is key, and it's going to take some land purchase to make that thing really develop the way we want it to. But all those boards, that B and CD, that's actually the business and community development, which Evelyn oversees. She's also the Canyon Economic Development Coordinator. Those are ongoing and always very important in everybody's mind. It's just bringing in the right interest, bringing in the right group, and being able to purchase those properties is the key.
So can I ask, we're talking 4th and 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
What do y'all have something in mind for what you want to go in there? What do you want to?
Well, what we have in mind is anything that meets with that comprehensive plan or zoning ordinance, which, of course, what we'd like to see is probably something that would require more space than just, for example, that old Taylor trailer shop that's been remodeled now for Little Caesars. In those areas, those lots are so small, it's kind of difficult to develop a CVS or something like that you may see in a major intersection like that. So it's going to take some redevelopment of that area and some purchases of some properties to make that happen.
So does typically the city go in and purchase properties when they become available?
There have been times that the CEDC, and tell me if I'm speaking out of turn, Joe, there have been times that the CEDC has, and there's been very successful projects where the CEDC has purchased that property and then resold it to a developer. It typically follows with some some CDC incentives through that process. They meet those
Is that
incentives.
kinda how Joe Tacos came into being?
Yes.
We partnered with them after they.
Exactly, they bought that building.
We bought the building in Lone Star, we bought the land at Lone Star.
Taco Villa, Feldman's, all of those would have been redevelopment projects.
Yep. Yep, Chicken Express area, that was.
Recent one, Powder Outfitters, that building,
Mm-hmm.
that whole suite.
That made that intersection look better.
Yeah, and those have always been very successful projects and a perfect idea of redevelopment. That's how that works. It starts best with the CEDC and they can purchase those projects. They've got some property they bought out there just west of Tex Randall, which had some old buildings. You guys might remember out there some old buildings. They removed some of those and cleaned it up, and so they're currently trying to market that and get something appropriate to come in there. So typically they're looking for something that's going to bring back. It's always about return on investments, sales tax revenues. And they've done a wonderful job doing that.
Okay, I'm just kinda trying to get in mind what you're thinking, so
Mhm.
continue on.
Okay. Again, it's kind of the same thing, work with EDC to bring target business to those areas, and Evelyn's really communicates that well, we all work together to do that. She typically works through Joe's office, and they try to bring in those target businesses, which again, would, meet this comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and also have a good return on investment through sales taxes. Consider purchasing property in these areas that become available, same thing. Adopt specific design standards for these areas, set them apart. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the draft zoning ordinance will have a Main Street overlay district, and it will allow for some masonry exteriors. It mentions some specific window designs.
Setbacks.
It also has some designs for putting parking rather than upfront parking out back. And as always, it's brought in some more buffering techniques and things like that we have talked about in the past. Where if you're, and you guys have seen this, when we come up before the P&Z and you're going to develop next to a residential area, those questions come up a lot. How are we going to separate that? So this new zoning ordinance is going to bring us some new ideas and buffering techniques to hopefully address those concerns. Create ordinances to protect the floodplain. At this point, we hasn't been very long. We recently went through a complete update, and on our floodplain ordinance. Most of you probably aren't very aware of what we're looking at with that, but it's in compliance with the National Floodplain Insurance Program. And additionally, we require, for example, they have what's called a base flood elevation. This is what your house, if you're in a 100-year floodplain, you're going to be built at this elevation to protect your house from flooding, ideally, not in a perfect situation, but in a 100-year event, you're going to have protected. Well, we've included a 1-foot freeboard, which you can build 1 foot higher than that to give you that additional protection. There are many things we could do to go above and beyond what we're doing now, and we can talk about that probably at another meeting if I think it needs to go to you guys. Some cities have 2-foot freeboards, but discussion we need to have at some point. You guys may have some great ideas on what we can do with that floodplain ordinance to modify it. We did go through a pretty extensive study a few years back with the Corps of Engineers. You guys remember that? They did a study on the Powder Creek area and the Terra Blanca Creek area. Made some suggestions on some flood mitigation techniques, but for the most part, they were found to be cost prohibitive. They were presented to the city commission and buying lots of land outside the city to form detention ponds, detention areas, some very expensive walls along the properties on golf course. Bill may not like. Some channelization things, some very expensive things, but they
We'll
also
talk about that when they built my home. back there, I thought, well, they built it up, you know, about 2 or 3 feet above what the floodplain is. Then I go out to Hunsley Park to walk, and you go out to the little gazebo out there, there's a line on the storage building that says, this is where the flood of 1978 came to. So I'm constantly looking back over my
Are you trying to find it?
house, trying to see if it's
Get the laser out.
high enough, you know.
Yeah, yours should be at least 1 foot above
It
that
is.
BFE.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the process. That's where we're at in that process. We can talk about that in a later date and see if you guys have some ideas. I'd like to have that discussion with you, see if anybody has ideas for anything we can add to the order, any kind of modifications. I can present that entire ordinance to you in a later date. I think John's 62nd minutes.
Amen. All right, number 7. Continue to develop public uses north of the square. What that's talking about is our civic complex, this area, the neighborhood around here. We have purchased a couple of pieces of property across the street over here, and we will continue to make those purchases as those lots become available, knowing that down the road we're going to need some additional city services, depending on what that is, whether that's a fire station, police station, expansion of this building, whatever we need some space to do that. So we're looking at some property over there. And I'm going to skip down. I'm going to cover number 9. I'll let Danny come back to number 8. On number 9, begin to make infrastructure upgrades in the downtown area. We've already, we're kind of in the process there. The shops on 5th were a major step in that direction, and that was prior to all of this starting, but there were major things that occurred with that. And now we're in the process of applying for a Main Street grant. The grant would enable us to, it's a $500,000 grant, and we would like to do some work downtown. And what we've chosen to do for those projects is on the east and west sides, those alleys, take those alleys and replace all the water and sewer in those alleys, and then rebuild those alleys as concrete alleys as opposed to brick or whatever they are at this point in time. Asphalt. And improve of those. Number 1, we would be able to improve the water sewer service, and also potentially set those alleys up so that down the road we might be able to feed fire suppression systems, sprinkler systems in those buildings on the east and west side, because there will come a day when someone needs to renovate and they'll be required to do some things like that. Currently they wouldn't have to, but rules can change. So we'd like to set ourselves up there. We also know that as the square expands, you walk from further away to get into the square. I mean, already I'm going to park over by the Baptist Fellowship Center, and then I'm going to walk behind that, cross that alley to get around to Syacamons or to get to the K Company or go somewhere. And right now I look down that alley and I look the best. Well, we come back in there and replace all of that. We can turn that alley into something that looks a little better. And now we're extending our square. We're making the aesthetic value of the square begins to grow and develop that. So those are some things we have in mind. And then along the lines for the infrastructure and upgrade of downtown area, also in the process of writing a request for qualifications for a downtown master plan. And we would like to be funding that in the near future, a plan where someone will come in, a firm will come in, and we will look at everything from traffic to parking to sidewalks to streets to brick streets and everything else in between, and help us set a vision just like this plan. And that vision's going to be way out there. It's not going to be anything that we could write a check for today, without a doubt. But again, it gives us a plan, and then we can start working toward that plan and biting off the pieces that we can afford to bite off. Today, someone might say, gosh, we ought to go improve all those sidewalks. We should. But as soon as we improve all those sidewalks, in 10 years when it's time to redo the roads and do everything else, we're going to take those sidewalks out because those sidewalks are going to be too tall, they're going to be too far to the left, or they're going to be at the wrong angle. So we've got to do it all at once. So that this downtown plan will help us get a vision for that and then move in that right direction. So those are boxes that we're checking off that we're in process of or we're not started with.
But pretty much take it out.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. But you have to have a plan if you're going to get there. So, Danny, number 8.
Talks about, back to number 8, promote rural and land uses that have limited or no city services. The subdivision ordinance, it's talking about allowed rural and residential lots with septic and water wells. Spring Canyon's new development going out just south of Spring Lake. It is more of that rural subdivision. It's gonna be served by, for the most part, served by water. For the most part, will be served by septic systems, so they're gonna be half-acre lots. Rather than curb and gutter, we're talking about ditch sections, so it's gonna have that rural feel to it. That's a good example of what this is talking about. Through the subdivision ordinance, we haven't done that yet, I don't believe. We're gonna add some language in there for, specifically where that would take place and where that would be allowed. At this point in time, it basically says if water and sewer are available for your property, typically that's within 300 feet, or sewer, it's about elevations, then you will tie on to city services. So we're gonna have to work on our language there and look at that and make some allowances for when we do have those rural type subdivisions that are becoming more and more popular, to bring some of those properties into the city. Since that's such a popular idea nowadays to have more of that rural setting, and you can see that by how much development we have out in the county. Spring Canyon's our first stab at it, so that is in process through our subdivision ordinance.
So will that be annexed into the city at some point?
Spring Canyon, it has been.
It has been.
Matter of fact, we're getting very close to having the infrastructure installed, streets paved, and probably be issuing permits for that thing in the next month or so.
So what about Canyon North?
Canyon North is not the city limits.
Not the city limits, but.
Yeah,
Spring-
we've kind of gone around that area, because you got Madison Park, and then we've annexed some of the property across I-27, where we annexed Kimbrough Stadium and a lot of WT property, and also where the school administration building is. That's in the city limits, so we're kind of going around to the east, connecting back to Spring Canyon.
I don't wanna hold up progress. Why are we not annexing Canyon North? Is there a?
All annexation is voluntary. So
So
if those people came to us and said, we would like to be annexed and pay city taxes, then we could consider that.
Legislator took our authority away.
That's actually our next item of discussion.
Who took it away?
The legislature.
So Canyon North residents would have to come and ask to be in.
Correct.
They would have to consent by
I didn't know how it
vote.
worked.
It just happened.
We'll talk about that here
Yeah.
in just a second. Covered that. Let's skip back down to item number 10, page 5, I believe. Just what you were talking about, Lori. Promote low-density residential developments within the ETJ, which ETJ, of course, is our extraterritorial jurisdiction within 1 mile of the city limits of Canyon. That's our ETJ. Adopt an ordinance requiring annexation before city water service can be supplied. It's not a good idea, in our opinion, to supply water service or sewer service to individuals that are not within the city of Canyon. So that's been a policy of the city of Canyon for years. We haven't done that. There's been a couple of occasions way back when there's special circumstances where there's some water service, but it's been a policy to not allow water and sewer service to annex. We need to formalize that as part of the ordinance, and it has been initiated. Through the subdivision regulations require the same level of standards in the ETJ that are required in the city, and that's means that the city has the authority, which you guys are aware of, to approve plats for their ETJ. Those come before you. Randall County has agreed to give us that authority to approve those plats in ETJ. Typically, what we've done is we've approved those plats through, we've made sure the drainage studies are correct, so nobody's gonna get flooded out there. We looked at some of the issues, but this ordinance number 1100, which was passed in November of 2018, formalize that process with the expectation, we make you aware that when you develop out in the ETJ, those growth areas are gonna have to meet our standards like it's within the city. The purpose of that is when you approve development within the ETJ, the reason for that is with the anticipation that someday you may have to take that over. That may come in connection with the city. They may request annexation. So when the city takes that over, we don't take over substandard streets. We don't take over substandard drainage structures. So that's what that's talking about. That's one item that's actually has been completed by ordinance number 1100 back in 2018. Next item, study the feasibility of annexing some of the recommended growth areas over the next 5 years. That was a recommendation that's playing actually before House Bill 347, which John and Joe were just talking about, largely prohibited us from annexing properties. At one point in time, the city could go out if that city was contiguous with that property was contiguous with the city king and met certain requirements. We could annex it as long as we did a service plan and showed them we could provide like services within a 3-year time span. I believe 3 years. However, now House Bill 347 basically prohibits the city from annexing property without owner consent. So, of course, we'll always continue to talk to the developers, and as they come to us with developments within our ETJ and talk about those subdivision plats, if they're contiguous with the city limits, we always try to encourage them and try to discuss with them the benefits of coming into the city with those city services. And water's huge. That's a big thing everybody's going to be concerned about. Kenny's done a wonderful job of building our water supply for years and years in the future. So that's very important that they can get those services. So we'll continue to do that as part of this recommendation. We'll continue to promote that, and as those properties become available, developing adjacent to the city, we'll continue to express to developers what a positive thing that would be to do that. They're not always willing to do that, which is understandable. They typically just see it. So I'm going to pay city taxes. What does that get me? Well,
Yeah.
That's educating those of what they do get.
They aren't going to have water and sewer service, like talking about those rural, low density developments and stuff. Is it just police service, or does it affect their insurance rates, or what's the?
Yeah, they'll have. Spring Canyon will have water service. By their choice, they won't have sewer service. It was an expense they didn't want to put in their lift stations, things like that. But yeah, they'll still have police, fire, trash service. And people take this for granted, but I think it's huge. I think it's many times even more important people realize is they do have protection of zoning and city regulations. You get out the counter, there's very little you can do. You may have deed restrictions, and depending on how well those are enforced, you may or may not be able to keep your neighbor from building something that didn't
Like an SOP?
comply with those deed restrictions. And I have people call me up all the time, complaining about their neighbors got this thing that's obviously not compliance with their deed restrictions or junk out in the county. You have the ability to contact our office, and we can enforce those zoning regulations. We can enforce nuisance regulations, weeds, junk, you name it. So a lot of those things are kind of taken for granted, or to me would be a huge benefit, because I've had property out in the county and I've had troubles with neighbors out in the county. So it's difficult to address that without those regulations. So we can provide that if you come into the city. Expand light industrial uses along Highway 60, rezone the vacant land in this area to light industrial. And what they're talking about is that area just primarily west of well, around the Texas Randall project, those areas on Highway 60. Again, CDC has purchased that property. However, I think they'd like to, rather than zoning it industrial, because it's pretty difficult to change zoning, it's better to wait and see what your clients may be interested in building.
What is light mean?
Light industrial is simply our industrial district. It allows for industry. It allows for less amenities like landscape and things like that. But if they choose to bring in something that'd be more appropriate for commercial use, retail use, or even, if that comes in residential uses wouldn't be allowed in industrial, so it might be better to wait and see what those potential clients are gonna wanna buy before we do that.
Railroad would get me from wanting a house out there, but
Yeah.
I want it to look nice just because you're coming in.
Yeah, if you're gonna build a motel or apartment buildings over there, you'd have to come back and change that zoning back, so it's probably best to wait and see what those potential developers are gonna be since you've got that land purchased. Work with the EDC to promote those areas for future industries. Really haven't had a lot of formal discussions, but those are always ongoing between all these guys and Evelyn and myself about discussions with potential clients and what it's gonna take to make that happen. Consider incentives like reduced wage development fees. I don't think we've really discussed any of that at this point. You guys agree with that?
Correct.
It's kind of on the back burner at this point.
Is there a mechanism even to be able to do that? No?
Through ordinances, and we can discuss some reduced wage fees. I think,
Yeah,
the government has authority to do that.
You can do some through, well, if you're doing building permits of that nature, you can do neighborhood empowerment zones, to take care of some of that. And you can do some of that through, contractual agreements through the EDC, or the city has its fair share of EDC tools. So, we're looking at development fees. We don't even have really any development fees at all, just
Not at this point.
At this point, we don't even have fees at all to be established. We're trying to get over that hurdle as itself, because the development's outpaced us. We don't even have a fee structure to deal with development. So virtually all the development, all the work we're putting into it's free of charge.
Which we're working on as part of our subdivision ordinance to recoup some of those fees. Chapter 4, transportation, update, streamline the thoroughfare documents, verify the city has active functional classifications and roadway standards. If so, update the elements to reflect the community understood the regulations, and coordinate updates between all city documents, including but not limited to the code of ordinances, the subdivision regulations, and the comprehensive plan to ensure consistency. The cities formulate and adopt these standards if they are not currently active. Part of our subdivision ordinance process probably involve a thoroughfare plan, which will address some of these issues. And I think Dan is now a member. We actually have a voting member on the MPO, Emerald Area MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is really great. Now we have actually some say in what's going on with some of these future developments, whether it be TxDOT, things like that. So, but we will be moving forward with that. It is in process with the subdivision ordinance and the possible thoroughfare plan through that. Always in discussions now with having Dan on the MCO. Develop cross sections to accompany the city's roadway desires standards. We do have, as I said earlier, we're working on design standards for those streets. It's been fairly vague, fairly weak in our subdivision ordinances as to what defines streets and street widths and what defines that street width. I mean, is the collector, what does the collector mean? What should that collector width be and things like that, major thoroughfares. It mentions them in some cases, but it really doesn't define so much what it talks about the widths of them, but how does it become, where does it become a collector? Our new subdivision ordinance will define those clearly and give some graphics as far as what those should look like. So, we'll be making huge progress on that when we adopt this ordinance. Create a map of city roads and the corresponding roadway classifications. Again, the subdivision ordinance is going to clarify those roadway classifications more clearly, and I'd have to ask Dan that question. Will there be are you planning on seeing developing a map at some point that says this is the thoroughfare, this is the collector, things like that?
I foresee the thoroughfare plan when we get, our current thoroughfare plan is virtually non-existent. It's part of the comprehensive plan, but yet we need to grow the thoroughfare plan into a document that will, if for lack of a better term, spill over into the comprehensive plan and spill over into all this other planning that we need to do from a transportation aspect. Through the local things, through the MPO, all that kind of includes, to me that means it's all basically in the thoroughfare plan is where I'm hoping. And we have yet to really get down in the weeds and really see how this is all going to shake out, but in my mind, I see the thoroughfare plan actually addressing a lot, if not all of this.
It's on page 106, I think, through 108 of what we do have. So you can see some of the highlights.
Right, and you kind of make some definitions of street widths on 99 and 100 in there. Kind of talks a little bit about your street widths. Why is that important? So when they come to us, we can say, well, this is what type of street you're designing right there. This is what it needs to look like, and this is how wide it needs to be. Instead of it just being arbitrary. Bill says, I'd like my street to be this wide, and we're like, okay. Well, this tells us this kind of street, because it connects two neighborhoods, is called this type of street. Therefore, it needs to be this wide. And things are just not arbitrary. So you don't drive around and you'll see it a couple of places. There's a couple of places in town where you've got a wide street and there's a narrow street. It's all the same street, it just narrows down or widens out for some reason. It's because we didn't have a really good plan at some point in time, and that's just what happened.
And last time falls along the same lines. Conduct an annual review of the thoroughfare map and ensure that it reflects the future land use policies and planned roadway and transportation policies. As Dan said, that's something that's going to be in process through this subdivision ordinance and his involvement with NPO, et cetera. So, John, I believe number 2 is.
All right, everybody, hang on. Number 2 on page 6. Continue to address traffic and transportation issues. So things that we heard about during our meetings. We heard about brick streets. We heard about our traffic on 4th and 23rd. We heard about parking concerns. We heard about bike lanes. We heard about entrances off 87 and 27 and about 1529, about those roads. So all of those things ended up being items in this plan that we were to address. The brick streets, one of the things we talked about in the comprehensive plan is we talked a little bit about growing down 15th Street. That was one of the areas that we talked about through our charrette, growing in that direction. So we know that's one direction we can grow. The downtown could kind of expand itself. You just think about it just kind of blowing out itself a little bit by a block or two each direction. I mean, that would be a simple thing down the road for that to happen if the community continued to grow and if the community wanted to do that. Part of that encompasses part of the 42 blocks of brick streets that we have. And so with our downtown master plan, we need to really identify what downtown is, what does it look like, exactly what that perimeter. We all say it looks like something. I say park, you say slide, you say swing set. I say the square downtown, you say it's only just that part there, and somebody else says it's another part. We need to define that, determine how large that is, look at what we're going to do for those brick streets, and then consider what we're going to do for the brick streets that are outside of that.
So the brick streets a good or bad thing?
You know, depends on where you live, who you are, and how much money you got. Very good question. That's a question we all have. If I live on one and it's not too bad, then I probably really like that. I kind of consider that. There are blocks that are further away, that people probably don't stay in those homes a long time. They kind of rotate through those homes. Those people may not be as concerned about that brick street because they ain't gonna live there all their life. They're there for 6, 9, 12, 18 months. So everybody's opinion of a brick street is different. And that's something we have to do. And when we get a plan going there through this master plan and then through a street plan, that's certainly going to involve community and citizens input, because everybody considers them different. And it's a tough thing, very expensive.
They're very expensive to maintain or to.
Well, I like brick streets.
I like them, I don't know.
But quick lesson, Canyon brick streets, brick laid on dirt, okay? They didn't really build much of a base when they built these streets. They've lasted forever. They're underneath all this blacktop asphalt you drive around here. They're there. They held up forever. The issue was they were designed to carry a whole lot less weight. When you think about the roller coaster street, whatever you get over to, Danny, 4 or 5 blocks over, you know what I'm talking about, whichever one, where we kind of bounce back and forth, like moguls. Same principle, right? Same principle as moguls. When I'm skiing, when I make my turn, when I step back and forth, it's my weight pushing that up. Well, it's done that same thing to that dirt. It's done the same thing to those bricks and created those bumps and moguls back and forth. If I want to take those out, I have to take all of that out, and I need to build a base. I've got a lot of work to do, an expensive process to put those back in there and save those bricks. If I want to take those out right, I take all that out. I got to bust out that curb and that edge, that gutter, because they don't match up with what a modern street would be. So no matter what you do, there's a lot of expense. We just have to figure out exactly what it is that the citizens of Canyon want to do, and that's coming. Just like we did this comprehensive plan that gave us a vision, we'll have to have some community meetings and some other things. The commission's going to tell us we need to work on the brick streets, and we need to.
Either way, it's expensive.
Something's got to give.
How long have they been there, since 1900?
18 whatever, early 1900s. They originally ran from the train depot to downtown to the hotel, because they wanted to impress anybody that got off the train. They wanted to impress them, and so they would get off, and then they would either walk or ride to the hotel downtown. And how impressed I am. I'm on brick streets the whole way. Now don't look at all the dirt everywhere else, but I was impressed by that. Just like Fourth, at one point in time, was called the Mile of Lights, or some kind of lights. Well, they put street lights all the way down there, like down to the university, all the way down Fourth. And that was a big deal out here, because they wanted to impress people and say, look, we have all these lights. And then they just kind of grew those brick streets out. And so we got a lot of work to do. So that's why it's on here, and it won't go away. It's in process. It'll keep going. 23rd Street and 4th, traffic. We got lots of traffic, lots going on there. So there's ways we can look at that. We need to begin that. Parking, we all know, is an issue at various places at various times. Bike lanes, we've already kind of moved in that direction with us accepting Russell Long. And actually, in my office, we've talked a little bit about some bike routes, maybe not bike lanes, but preferred bike routes and those kind of things. I think you'll see some of that in the near future. Some acceleration lanes, some things here that TxDOT controls, but actually on one if not both of these, there's some projects coming up with TxDOT in the near future which may be addressing these
20 years future,
without us even doing it. But they start to get on their books, and with us on the MPO, we can request that funds be used to help us do those things.
20 years out.
Incorporate complete street treatments and future projects. Complete street.
Coming out here.
Think of we could almost call it a complete street, the spur. We could almost call Russell Long a complete street, right? It's got a place for people to walk. It's got a place for bicycles. It's got a place for buses to pull over, and it's got some lanes for cars. You've seen that in other places. In Frisco or in a new town, you would see those kind of things where there's medians and different things. And you've also seen that where you take downtown Amarillo, as you're driving to the ballpark, they've done some complete street treatment there. The corner sticks out so that a pedestrian sticks out a little bit out there on the corner so that I can see, and parking is more back behind that, as opposed to standing here where I can't see beyond the car. Those are some complete street ideas, and those are listed here, and those are things that we would be interested in down the road as we move in those directions to doing that. Certainly downtown would take some complete street treatments and redoing of those. Coordinating thoroughfare planning and regional state agencies. Again, Dan talked about the need for us to do a thoroughfare plan. We'll need to do that plan, then we'll need to get that into the MPO and let TxDOT know what we're interested in doing, what we'd like to do. Then we can negotiate with them, hopefully on 4th and 23rd. We'd like to do this. How can you help us do it? If you do part of it, what can you do? And work through them. Again, without a plan, it's difficult for us to just randomly do those kind of things. Planning takes money. Comprehensive plan was $100,000 to get this together. But did it get us further down the road? Yes. Will the downtown plan cost $100,000 to $200,000? That's a lot of money. But will it get us further down the road and give us a target and something to shoot for? Yes. Otherwise, it's just whoever's here making a decision, and then the next group of people, why in the world did they do that? And that's where we don't want to be, is why did they waste that money? Now we got to tear it out. We've all seen that at various places. Sometimes we've done it in our own house. 5 years later, why did we do it that way, and we're taking it out? It cost us twice. We don't want to do that. So the planning will help us do that. Danny, how about page 9, number 5 there, number 1?
Talks about reviewing all the utility plans each time we have the future land use plan is updated and make updates as needed. I may let Dan speak to this, but I believe the utilities are reviewed each time the plans will be updated, reviewed and updated. And a lot of times, I don't know that always, our water and sewer studies are reviewed and considered early in all our development process, depending on what level of that development is. But, Dan, can you speak to that anymore?
It's funny how time flies with that sort of thing. The last set of water and sewer studies before this last one that we just completed, that was 3 years ago, was the year 2000. So we're really focusing trying to upgrade our water and sewer studies every 5 years. They're not cheap either, so that's something we have to plan for, just like John was saying. The way we're growing and the way we need to try to plan for all this growth from a utility standpoint, I feel it's critical we keep current utility studies on the book so we have a way to plan, a way to game plan for what's coming up.
We want to do that every 5 years, and we haven't done it since 2000.
No, we just received. It seems like we just received the update to the 2000 studies, but they're already 3 years old. They were done in 17.
And are they just looking at capacity for future development, or are they also looking at condition of existing for?
All of the above.
Each of them, there's water and there's wastewater about this size. So. And we use those. I know when I have been. I know Dan has. When we have new development coming in, like we've got one new development on the west side of FM 2590, we're looking at that plan as well as the comp plan to make sure it's cohesive. Especially, we're in the thought process now. What about the next subdivision north of it or to the east or west of it?
The goal is to try to be a little more proactive instead of reactive with utility extensions and that sort of thing to help development. We've been pretty reactive in the past.
Yeah, Pete. All right, all of that leads us to this big number 2 there on page 9. Formalize a capital improvement plan. That's where I thought you were going, is that, we got a lot of new stuff, we got a lot of old stuff too, and how do we get the old stuff fixed? We've all been there. some of you at your homes make a plan. Obviously, you made a plan for a small bakery, and that plan, you've been able to follow that plan, and that plan has worked out, correct? Either that, she's got really, or she's just winging it, and got really lucky.
Yeah.
But you look at it, before you opened it, you looked at it and said, can I afford to do this? How do I afford to do this? How do I do it? How do I do it? People go to Joelle all the time and say, I want to do this thing, but I don't know how to do it. I mean, how do I get the money? How do I plan for that? How do I make that work? All of you are in professions, or you've experienced the process of, I've got to down the road, and how do I get down the road? I've got things I need to fix. I got new things I need to buy and want to buy, and all of those things add up. And how do I get there? Well, a capital improvement plan is a way for the city to do that. With the capital improvement plan, which Joe has got us working on now, and of course there'll be a cost because it's a plan, it's something you have to do. But we go through and we look at these plans of Dan's, we look at the water and the sewer, we look at our comprehensive plan, we look at everything we're doing and everything we'd like to do, and then we start to find out what it's going to cost to do those. Like if I've got X number of miles of road that need this, or I have an X number of feet that pipe need to replace, and all of those type of things, or I need this expansion, or we'd like this other park, or we'd like to add on to the cap, or we'd like to do this or that. Well, those are projects that we will eventually need to list out. And then we'll come to our, and some of those projects will come out of this comprehensive plan, and some will come from the commission, and some will need to come from us. And we'll work with the commission on what projects are the most important. Which of those need to get done right away? What's a critical issue, and what's something I can wait on? And we'll start to bring those 4 or 5 projects will start to surface. We'll put them at the top of the list. Then we'll dive into those and find out what those really cost. It's not just a ballpark, it's like, what's it going to cost to do that? We'll bring those costs to the commission. We'll say, these are the 5 things we feel like that we need to get done. We need your help in finding ways to fund these. There's alternatives. Maybe there's a grant out there. Maybe there's a this out there. Maybe there's a this out there. Maybe there's a tax increase out there. Whatever that thing is, we need to plan for it, and we need to start trying to achieve and meet that. And you know that for your own house, your capital improvement, you've got quite a few things on your list. Well, our list is pretty long here too. And we know infrastructure in America is aging. I fall back to my story watching the news one night. Pauley Pavilion, UCLA, had just 3 or 4 years ago just been renovated. It was in great shape. And then a wooden, huge, I don't know how big a pipe, broke on the outside of that building and flooded it. That pipe was put in during the Civil War to move water through Los Angeles. And it continued to do that all the way until about 3 years ago. And then it broke. And it ruined this facility again. Well, all over America now, I don't know if we got any Civil War pipes in the ground here, Dan, but we've got some pipes that were put in soon after there. And you know what? Some of them are still holding up. And so we got to determine where those are and start working on those. So that's what a CIP plan is, and it's a long task. You allow things to bubble to the top, and you allow the next thing to bubble at the top, and then something becomes a priority and cuts in front of all of those. Okay, the car broke and I got to get to work. I got to buy a car. Well, so much for the trailer we were going to buy. Okay, so those are what you have to do as a city. So we're working on that, and that's why it says in process on all of those moving through there.
Any projects that we already dialed up yet?
Our engineer came forward with just water and sewer, just basically on top of his head, and roads, 75 or 80 projects already. And then I'm going to throw some parks in there. I'm going to throw a police station in there. I'm going to throw a substation one day for a fire department because our community is growing in there. Our list is going to be pretty long. It's billions of dollars in big cities. It'll be a lot here too. Will I or you all ever see them all get done? Nope. But we need to set a plan, and we need to start working on the ones that we can, so that those guys after us say, hey, they got some things done. And they did some smart things. All right, number 3, consider feasibility of impact fee. An impact fee. You know, right now, if a developer comes to Canyon, then that developer, it has certain expectations from the city. And he's gonna really kind of expect the city to get water today, the water and sewer to him, no matter how far that is. And you know, Canyon East got lucky, because 25 years ago, the city of Canyon said, let's build a line out here to the corner of 27, because they really thought one day that would be a truck stop, right, Bill? The big plan was we were gonna have the truck stop 25 years ago, and that didn't really happen. So that line kind of sat there, and a few people were on it, but it didn't really get used very much, that water and sewer line. All of a sudden, the Coolmans are ready to sell some land and develop a neighborhood in Canyon East forms, and by golly, there's a line already there. So good foresight on our forefathers. But if that line hadn't have been built, there would have been a question of, we want to build out here, but how do we get there? You know? And so, also, when you develop that development, how does that get there? And then also, what does it do for your water treatment, your wastewater plant? Well, we're just going to put more in there. Well, that's good, but that means it fills up faster. And the faster that big tub fills up, the faster you got to do what? Have another tub, or come up with a new system, or spend more money. So an impact fee is something that it is used in high growth areas. Impact fees are going to be all over the Metroplex, all over the Interstate 35 corridor, all over Houston, anywhere that people are growing. And what an impact fee does, it allows a developer to participate in his success and to participate in the changes he is going to, or she is going to create to the community. If they're going to add X percentage to your water treatment plant, then they're going to help pay for the expansion of your water treatment plant. Is that a word that everybody likes? No. It's in plan. It's something that the city will talk about, and where we go from there, our city commission makes that decision, and others make that decision. Anything else on? I mean, is that? Our plan says that we should educate the commission on it, and we're going to educate the commission on it, and then the commission can make a decision on what they want to do. Develop an asset management plan. Part of Dan's and wastewater and streets, trying to determine the condition of all our facilities, what our facilities are like, what new facilities need, and where we need to go with those. Number 6, public facilities. Monitor growth and plans for public facilities as needed to meet population need. We're going to need to grow. This particular building is beginning to be full. We're going to need new facilities. The further you get from this fire station, the longer it takes for a fire truck to get there. There are certain parameters that we want fire truck to be able to get to those neighborhoods. It affects your rates. And so we want to be able to do that. So down the road, we're probably looking at a substation, fire station. One day, maybe Canyon's big enough to have a substation, police station. I don't know that. Maybe is that in our time or not? I can't answer that question, but we need to continue to monitor that and be aware of that. So all of a sudden, we don't there and have a problem or be up a creek. And so those are things that we think about and we'll be working on. Implement plans for one of the police stations through the comprehensive plan. One of the things that we showed folks and talked about was a possible expansion of a police station, a new police station, which would buy us time in this building because we would move out and free up some space for expansion and those type of things. So it's just another thing that we have initiated and that we're actually looking at. High quality standards for public facilities. We want to continue to make sure that we take care of our buildings and our facilities. The CIP will list those projects. Just because a park's been there 50 years doesn't mean that park doesn't need to be replaced at some point in time. So that needs to be in that CIP and whatever facilities need to be there. On page 12, coordinate with Randall County about the future of the courthouse. In theory, we haven't started that, but that's an ongoing thing, and we know that eventually there's going to need to be something happen with the courthouse. I don't think anybody today can tell you what that thing's gonna be, but we need to continue to think about that, have dialogue about that, and hopefully one day we'll land on the right idea and the right fit will occur, and something will be able to happen there. All right, Danny, you're on chapter 7, page 12.
Protecting the existing neighborhoods, talking about developing some infill standards, take a look and feel of the existing neighborhoods. Again, with our limitations on some of the exterior materials we can allow, we may be kind of handicapped in that area, but that's something we're looking at with the zoning ordinance and process to see what we can do through as it redevelop. I mean, the good thing about it is a lot of these older neighborhoods are constantly redevelopment going on with some of these older homes that are being torn down and rebuilt. These builders are going back with similar sized houses. You don't see a lot of homes setting in this house that's yard property lines 2 stories tall in the middle of these neighborhoods to stick like a sore thumb. So that tends to happen on its own, but we'll continue to look at that and try to get some ideas of what we can do with our limitations based on state statutes. Update the zoning ordinance to ensure that the adjacency standards, and that's talking about where you got your residential areas, again, like I mentioned earlier, where your residential backs up or your new development backs up to a residential area, for example, over there on 38 and 4th Avenue that you guys dealt with, I'm sure you remember vividly. They went with some fencing over there, but our new zoning ordinance is going to give us some very specific standards on widths, distances from your building to the residential area. I think it's 40 feet. Some screening requirements, various optional screening requirements, whether that be hedges or fences and whatnot. So there are going to be some very good and I think much needed standards for those buffers and adjacency standards there for this new zoning ordinance. Encourage housing maintenance strategies and neighborhood associations with existing neighborhoods to increase community development involvement buy-in. Really not any actions taken at this point. I need to sit down with Joe and possibly Evelyn and get some ideas on what we can do to reach out to those communities to see what we can get with somebody. I think Joe may have some experience with that. Morgan, I think he'll be a resource in that. On page 13, implement proactive code enforcement. We'll talk about developing some neighborhood engagement plans and trying to use some proactive tools. We're in the process, as we always have been, and we'll continue to improve that process with the use of bill inserts. Typically try to do some articles in Canyon News periodically. Reach out to some neighborhoods as things are going on. We've had some community meetings with some of the development and some of the flood process standards that are coming that may have affected some of those areas. Well, we'll continue to do those water bill inserts in articles and reach out on social media. And I'd like to at some point, I've seen some other communities have done some wonderful in Border, I think, that are really entertaining, educational little video production they put together that they put out on their website and I think on social media. Those are always good. I have a son going to school over at Oklahoma State and they put together some great videos to get across those public awareness campaigns. So we'll continue to look at that and work towards that. Research some of the latest software for code enforcement departments. We're currently doing that. Looking at some new softwares to help expedite that process for our staff, where we can do more things from the field. And, of course, the goal's always to make it move quicker and document better and give you a better follow-up process, as well as going paperless and saving that paper, so we're working on that. Implement some home maintenance strategies, with the city staff and city commission direction, pick a few programs and implement them annually or on an ongoing basis. Thank you, Mandy.
Sorry.
That's fine, it's going kinda long, I understand. Have a good week.
You too.
That's another no action at this point. We need to work on that and figure out what some of those, programs, we might reach out for some grant programs. I know we're available. And again, Joe had some programs back in Border, I think they reached out to, and maybe develop some, city programs where we can simply do some things and reach out to some of these people and give them some assistance in rehabbing or even removing some of those nuisance properties, for example. It leads into the same thing, establish a quantitative goal to rehabilitate three houses a year. We're gonna have to study some more on that and see what that involves. We really haven't done anything towards that. And the grant coordinator is the same situation. Something we're gonna haven't done anything on, but we'll work towards. Number 4, adopt updated guidelines for new single-family homes. Review the residential portion of the zoning ordinance and identify deficiencies. Update to ensure that housing recommendations in this plan can be enforced, and we've looked into that as part of our new draft zoning ordinance, and certainly work towards, and this kind of follows in, I think, with the next couple of items where, with number 5, our zoning ordinance has been pretty limited on categories, and you guys have heard me talk about this before. I think we had to have more zoning categories, for examples, and diversify those options for those builders and developers and homeowners to do certain things. So, Freeze and Nichols did a great job making some recommendations for us, and I think we're still gonna make a couple of modifications, but, more options for different lot sizes, smaller lot sizes, some mixed uses are gonna be involved in that with townhouse and single-family homes and garden home type developments, without going through any special process. It'll be an allowed use, and we can point them to that specific zoning ordinance or that zoning type. Moving on to page 14, item number 6. Promote higher densities along Valley View Road and Highway 60. As I mentioned earlier, certainly around Highway 60, we're leaving it open. We had some hotels over there. Had a hotel over that area years ago that burned down. I think that's
Several
something
times.
like, yeah, it did, didn't it? It's kind of like the old hotel up in the I-40 in Amarillo. That thing's caught fire on every time. But I think the property that CDC owns, everyone's always looking for some, as we all know, as we're fixing to talk about here in the near future, is a lot of times those higher densities, well, always those higher density developments are the greatest return on investment from the city standpoint. I mean, that's always a good positive thing. It just needs to be in the right location and have those correct buffers from other areas. But that's something we'll continue to look at. Valley View Road has been more and more successful with 2 student housing type properties out there on Valley View Road. I think they've done well. I think their occupancy loads are still up. You guys may know more about it than I do. I think the first one was down for a while, the second was up, so it kind of fluctuates, but that seems to be growing that direction. WT helps with that, so that's always going to be something we can take into consideration with their future use plan as those things are brought forward. Number 7, create develop a guidebook with pictures of desired housing projects for Canyon include desired building materials and other aesthetic elements. Again, we're kind of handcuffed. A lot of these things sounded really good at the time, but we may be sort of handcuffed on. But I think we can certainly say desired. It's not required. So that's something we need to work on and put together as maybe a part of that development guide that we're working on now. So we can work on that. Number 8, is that mine, John? Yeah. Update community livability, chapter 8. Update the zoning and subdivision regulations again. Include land use compatibility mechanisms between non-residential and residential uses. Both separation and buffering ideas I talked about earlier, which is always very important. We've struggled with in the past, so that zoning ordinance will provide us with some spacing and buffering items to provide those compatibility mechanisms. Facades add requirements for sign materials, 100% masonry stone and compatible buildings compatible with materials of the primary building. Bill, do you remember this discussion when we were going through the design orders? We had many discussions about requiring the sign materials to be masonry and or match the material of the primary building. And that I think that with the stakeholders, I think is where the wheels came off on that. But that's something that's not in the current draft zoning ordinance. I may need to go back and have discussions with Joe and put that back in there. It's been years. You know, it's a recommendation that was come up with in this, and I think we need to run it up the pole and see what happens. But I'll add that some language in there again, and we'll have maybe one of those things that succeed this time, or maybe not. But that's something I need to add. Screening, require all waste receptacles outside the building within the view of the right of way to be screened for public view, which is a great idea. It's in there. We've added that to our new draft zoning ordinance. That's in process. That's typically just screen on 3 sides, but still let it be. We have side loaders, not front loaders, so they have to be able to get it to them and pick them up. But that description is in our new zoning ordinance, so that's underway. Landscaping, add more comprehensive landscaping regulations to conserve water and improve the aesthetic quality of non-residential development. Develop an approved plant list with native and drought tolerated plants. Reached out to many of our local experts in nurseries and landscape architects. Of course, Neil, always reach out to Neil, and Culture Gardens and Panhandle Garden, is that correct? Greenhouse. Panhandle Greenhouse. Several others. The landscape architect, John, does a lot of work over at WT. Cleve Turner reached out to all those folks and had some great input from those folks. So we're in the process and put together a pretty good, what would be a recommended plant list for this area. Those would be as part of those areas, those commercial and multifamily and duplex developments that require landscaping. Here's our approved plant list. It does give some authority for us, because it can never be all inclusive. Somebody's going to bring something up that, hey, this works great and it meets your requirements. So it gives us some ability as a building official to look at that and say that that meets requirements, and that plant list continue to grow. And that'd probably be with reaching out to those experts in the area and seeing what they think about it, because I certainly do not have the experience. Trees, amend the tree orders to identify the appropriate party responsible for removal of dead trees on private property. We have a lot of, during that drought we had a few years back, that 3-year drought, we had a lot of trees that died. And I think this came before the city commission a few times. Am I correct, John? Was that discussed with the city commission at all?
I don't know if we've ever talked about a formal plan, but the trees have, yes.
This is something during the process that I think it was probably half and half who thought this was something that needed to be done. And I think it's a great idea. we need to study on it, because the issue's gonna be if, the city has to go and remove those trees. We need to make sure we're doing that right. We're protecting ourselves and the property owner from any damages and remove some of those dead trees. But I agree wholeheartedly, that's something that needs to be looked at, because these trees, and we're working on, if they're obviously a nuisance or a hazard, we have the ability to do that today, so we're doing that. But it would be really nice to have some formalized, processes for removal of dead trees. Those certainly can be a real hazard in these high winds in this area. John, I believe you're up.
All right, and I think you covered the dead trees, so you hit number 3 here, so I'll kind of wrap us up on the 2 and the 4 on those. Adopt a parkland dedication ordinance. Parkland dedication ordinance would be an ordinance where if I'm a developer and I'm gonna develop 500 homes, X number of acres, X number of lots, there's a formula that the city would have that would state that in the area that you are, there's already a large park. Let's say I was gonna develop just to the east of Paul Lindsay Park. Okay, if I could develop in the lake there, and you said you would come as a developer and say, but I want a park, and we would say, there's already a huge park right there beside you. Your streets lead to a large park, and so instead of you developing a park in your subdivision, what we want you to do is we want you to help us improve the park that you're adjacent to. You're gonna add people to that on a regular basis, so we wanna add to that park. So based on number of homes and a formula, then they would pay the city funds, money to the city, and then that money would go into an account to only be used for the improvement of that park, because the citizens that live in that neighborhood will be going to that park. That's the closest one to them. Let's say it was somewhere else where they were far from any other park, and we didn't have a park adjacent to them, and we're talking another subdivision of 500, let's say, homes. Then we would go to them and say, you need a park in your neighborhood doesn't have one. We would let them know, based on a formula, something they knew up front, the size that needs to be this size. And then there would also be a formula that would determine what their investment in that park needed to be. The city would also be investing in that park, but they would have a responsibility for investing in that park. So that landowner would provide parkland, it would be a parkland dedication, they would provide land, and then they would help fund that park. And the city would jump in there, and then they would deed that park and that land and all those pieces of equipment to the city, and the city would be responsible for that moving forward. That's what a parkland dedication ordinance is. We've discussed one through the years, but our plan, comprehensive plan, discussed that, so we'll be talking about that again with our commission and going through that. And the first part's simply an education process like we're doing today, where we just talk about something, and then we move forward and see if there's any support for that. Number 3, Danny's kind of already talked about a dead tree removal program. Number 4, implement community character and branding enhancements. Again, that would be, you see various communities that have signage throughout the town that gives you decorative signage, wayfinding. Wayfinding is the word I'm looking for. That helps you move throughout the town so that you know where you're going. It adds interest to the people. Oh, I didn't know that was here. Let's go check that out. And opportunities for the city to improve various areas. Part of our character, talking about that corner. What does that corner need to look like? How can, if someone buys that corner, but could the city invest in that corner also to help that corner look differently, look better, provide roadway improvements, that I'm gonna put in a street, well, we'd like to go in with you, and we'd like you to improve that street to make it a complete street. Let's add, can we add this type of corner to it? Can we add a median to it? Or there's some other things that we might invest in that street so that that street is different than just the street that you, as Bill wanted to build. We'd like to add to that. And those would all be enhancements and chances, opportunities for the city to participate and just continue to enhance and grow the city. In the CIP, those would be projects that would be listed in that capital improvement plan. So again, initiated, some of them are ongoing, and some of those things we haven't started. We have cruised through this really quickly, but I hope you see that we're making progress. I mean, go back and look at those color codes and look at the ongoing and look at the things that are in process and the things that are completed. What Danny spent the most time on was subdivision and zoning ordinances today, and that's a huge beast that we are about to get our hands around. It'll be a matter of months, but when we do that, this was huge, and we got it done. This next piece will get done also, and it just leads us to the next piece. But all of it is logical, and you can see we're making headway, and some things cost money, and some things just cost time and effort. And so hopefully you can see that we're moving in that direction. Some of these things you're gonna see again, they're gonna come back before you. And so hopefully you'll be familiar with those. That's my 2 cents, Danny.
Very good.
When you say we, who put all this together? I should know, but I don't. Who?
The entire comprehensive plan, that was in conjunction with a comprehensive plan committee appointed by the city commission. It is a large part of that, and our staff and led by John and Freeze and Nichols.
So you two
Put that together.
commissioners.
And then Danny and I went through and reviewed we put this together, so we determined where we were on that.
Yeah, this matrix.
I'm impressed. This was a lot of work.
This matrix we put together was something that Freeze and Nichols put together with these recommendations to kind of summarize. Each chapter at the end of each chapter, it had recommended actions. Well, they did a really good job putting together this matrix at the end of it. We just simply modified that matrix to add some columns to help us keep track. As we did something, we go through and say, here's the action, this is the date we did it. So it just helps you guys to see at a glance, if you're looking at this, kind of where we're at and what's going on. So, Freeze and Nichols did a fantastic, John did a fantastic job. He put a amazing amount of work into that. And that committee spent a lot of time on that.
Well, it doesn't do us any good just to talk about it. We want something to happen, and I know you all do too. And we want to continue to see we want to know where we've been and where we're going. And that's this plan, this matrix, all of those kind of things will help us do that. And it's going to be very important that the commission also be able to understand that. We're going to do this same presentation. We wanted to do it for you all first so that you can see it. We can improve and get better at that. And we want to also do that for them and show them where we are with those things. Because there's some decisions down the road that have to be made that are complicated and costly. And we just, as a staff, that's our job, is to provide that map and then let you all as the citizens, as a committee, as a very important commission, and then as the city commission, to tell us which way you want us to go, and then let us run that direction, and we'll get there as fast as we can.
I believe it's our turn to take appropriate action, which is to vote on this and then send it to the city commission. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, sir. Yeah.
So, I would entertain a motion to approve this or not approve it. Got a motion, okay? Got a second? Any more discussion? Good questions today. Appreciate it. Any more discussion?
just, does this entail the annual report, also the matrix? Is it- all right.
Yes.
That's what I interpret as being part of that annual report, an annual report is telling where we're at.
Sure.
In those steps, this matrix kinda helps us, to organize that annual report.
I've been on the P and Z a long time, and we had a comprehensive plan for a lot of years, and we never went over it. And so to me, this year to go over it and review it is good. To sit down and see where we're at and where we're going. And
Yeah, I collected a lot of dust.
Yes.
It did, and this is what we need to do. We need, annually, you can expect to see us come back with the same format, present that, and present that to City Commission. And that'll give us much better preparation in our minds when we do that 5-year update. You know, we know where we're at. We're prepared to say, hey, this is what we've done, and it'll probably, hopefully this will generate some discussions with you guys as to where you think maybe we need to go from there, any changes we need to make. So, I think these guys gave us a great, comprehensive plan as well as tools to review it and update it.
You mentioned Monday's workshop.
Oh, yes, at 11:30, we've been talking, Joe and I both have sat in on the presentation about fiscal responsibility and how developments affect that. We had a American Planning Association, it's Northwest Texas chapter, I think it's called. They met here we hosted it at the Cole Community Center, and this group called Verdunity made a presentation, about a 4-hour presentation about that, and how these developments, how those rooftops, how much they cost you as a citizen, how much development costs Joe Q. citizen in subsidizing that in some ways, and how much tax revenues those things produced. It's really interesting. It's an interesting presentation to listen to. So you guys are welcome to be there. It's going to be at 11:30 on Monday the 20th, and it's planned to be a 4-hour presentation. And then we'll have a regular City Commission meeting at 4:30, which will present this again and conduct some other items. But if anybody has the opportunity to sit in on it, it'll be over at the Paladera Room at the Community Center. And it's just a really interesting topic that I hadn't seen before, where these guys have done a lot of studies, and we've actually hired them to do a fiscal analysis on just examples of some of our developments are going on, how much it costs to maintain those things from a street maintenance standpoint and things like that, and how much tax revenue they do produce, and at what point in time do you start seeing the return on that investment. And that varies depending on what the upfront costs were for it, of course. Then you try to figure out those annual costs and maintenance costs and whatnot. And sales tax dollars are a very difficult item to put into that equation. So it's hard to figure that out. But that's kind of their forte. They've done a great job of that. So anybody wants to sit down on that, 11:30 Community Center.
Let Danny know if you're interested in that.
We'll
reach out to him.
post an
Wonder what
agenda.
time we get off the golf course?
Huh? No, I know we still got to vote.
You'll pass an email out with the agenda.
Oh, will. Yes, I'll send each one of you the agenda.
If you let us know, we'll provide food. So it's a 4-hour adventure. So.
Well, we had a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There is none. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, lady and gentlemen.
Thank y'all very much. Yes, that was
Thank y'all.
a little long.
Okay, if I keep this.
Absolutely, that is yours. And if anybody doesn't have a comprehensive plan or a zoning code, please let me know, and I've got something here.
Yes, sir.
Joel Enriquez.
Welcome to Deacon on the first meeting. Thank you.
Jeremy has to get out of here, he's got kids to take care of, church.
So our wife is very interesting.
That would be really, interesting.
It's what you do.
Good work.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's
Before you get along.
That's
Well,
fine.
and that's the whole part of it, right? It's a big piece of it.
Here's the signed minutes, Danny.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you, Bill.
See ya. Good job.
Appreciate
y'all.
you being here.
So what are you gonna do to that golf course behind my house?
Who, me?
Danny mentioned it a while ago.
Oh,
About
that's not,
possibly
that
build the wall.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. That's
Oh, that's Lord.
I just wanted to scare you. That was cost prohibitive. That was one of those things that.
You know, because at one time, before the city bought the golf course, Dubois wanted to build houses behind our house. He was gonna buy that, well, I think he owned the land, because it's part of the golf course. He was gonna build houses back there, and we're going.
I think that's in the comprehensive plan to promote housing development on the golf course.
We got it. And I want to buy the land from the city behind my house.
That's what you gotta do.
Get it early.
But I'm gonna get that phone call, Bill's calling to buy this land, I'm like, God dang it.
You wanna stop developing, buy the property.
I'm glad that
Well,
you are
so-
engaged.
Bill, you can't buy that hole.
I just went there in between those.
That hole is not.
I was there in between 12 green and 13 tee box.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
Just a little strip in there.
That's right. You can do whatever you want with the rest of it. I just want that little strip right in there.
like to go from one hole to another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little pole booth, golf cart.
Oh, you sell beer out there.
Bill just steps out his back door and just starts around the golf. I don't know if you ever stopped at the pro shop or not.
I always call them before I do. I have a little round, I can play 5 holes without going even close to the pro shop. I can play 13, 14 up the hill, 15, play the par 3 16, and then play number 12.
The mayor's house is right there, we're gonna have to have him monitor Bill's activities.
You can monitor the mayor anyway. I'll tell him, because he walks on the golf course, which you're not supposed to.
Walks right by a big old sign, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
We'll have to get the police out there, just take care of that.
They're lawbreakers, I'm telling you.
Well, I called Casey one time because we had some kids out there from the apartments. They were on their bikes, and they were riding on number 13 green. I mean, they were just doing all sorts of stuff. And it was the time they just sanded them and watered them heavy because they were trying to get that sand in there, and it was. Casey, he caught them before they got away. What happened was one of them was in the sand trap trying to ride his bicycle out and hit the front wheel on the lip and bent it.
Not your purse, did you?
And when he bent it, they were back there trying to fix it, and that gave Casey enough time. You know, yeah, he was going to jump up out of it, and it hit the sand was soft, so he couldn't get the lift he needed, and he just bent that front wheel on the edge.
What is it, number 14 tee box or vendors?
Yep.
Right.
No, 15 tee box, yeah.
15 tee box.
I was like, oh, I'm playing through your yard.
You know John Spring.
Yeah.
We crossing that, we got off of 14, we're crossing the street, crossing Genuine,